In May of 1999, a 14-year-old girl made her way to a Hong Kong police station. She told the police officers there that for the past several weeks, she had been constantly plagued by the ghost of a woman who was bound by electrical wire and tortured to death. Ah Fong is what the girl was called in the media, but her real name is not known. She told the police that she wanted to confess so that the ghost would finally leave her alone. Fong admitted to taking part in the torture and disposing of this woman's body. Fong had run away from home at the age of 13, and she was well known to police in that area. They first dismissed her as being high on drugs, mentally ill, or simply just delusional. But they decided to follow up on her story just in case she was telling the truth. Officers were sent to the third-floor apartment to check the alleged crime scene. Entering the apartment, it was like walking into freaking Hello Kitty universe. It was decorated and filled with Hello Kitty furniture, Hello Kitty carpet, Hello Kitty curtains, Hello Kitty dishes, and Hello Kitty toys. You can just picture it, right? Hello Kitty freaking everywhere. The police went through the entire apartment and they found that it had been totally abandoned. Police found a dirty and stained, oversized Hello Kitty mermaid doll. Upon further investigation, the inside of the toy had a decapitated skull of a woman sewn on the inside of it. This skull was later found to be that of Fan Man-Yee, who was the mother of one young son. This case became known as the Hello Kitty murder, and it has been regarded throughout Hong Kong as one of the most depraved crimes in memory. Hey guys, welcome to episode 30 freaking 1. We got there. All right, so I'm super excited. Things that have happened with this podcast recently. If you saw it on Instagram or on Facebook, we hit 1,500 downloads, which was my goal to hit by the end of the month, and we hit that early. So thank you to every single person who has listened. Even if you listen to it for a couple minutes and decide that I'm not for you, it still counts as a download. But I know that so many of you are following, are loving, subscribing, reviewing, all that kind of crazy stuff. And I love you all. I really appreciate it. So before we get into this story, I just want to give you guys some trigger warnings. I don't always remember because, I've said it before, but I'm of the opinion that if you're listening to a true crime podcast, there's going to be a lot of triggers. So you shouldn't need to be warned, but just because I'm actually remembering this time, I'm going to give you just a few that I can think of, okay? But this is a brutal murder, so trigger warning for brutality, trigger warning for rape, trigger warning for abduction, trigger warning for drug abuse, trigger warning for addiction, trigger warning for possibly hauntings. I don't know, like whatever you can think of, there's a trigger warning for that because this is not an easy case. And I know I was talking about giving you something a little bit easier to cleanse your palate after Israel fuckwad McGee. I was going to put this one on the Patreon, but I have not recorded my new episode, my episode 31 yet. So I figured that this would be episode 31. And I'm working on quite a few other cases at the same time. And I think I might have mentioned it to you that I just kind of wing it. And I put out the content that kind of strikes me and like what I'm in the mood for. So, I'm sorry if you were expecting something a little bit more tame this week. But it's not going to be tame. I've got nice fluffy lashes because I just got back from my lash fill, and I'm super, super excited about that. I got to sleep in. I gave up a few different things that were taking up my time recently because I was just feeling a little burnt out. I am a fitness instructor. I used to do that full time, and now I just do it one day a week, but I just decided I just can't do it anymore for a while. My job, the job, selling cars, is keeping me super busy right now, and we're shorthanded. And so I just figured less is more. So the less things, the less irons that I have in the fire, the better content I can put out there and the better job I can do at my real job. So just kind of gave up some things for a while, and I know I'm going to miss it, and I know I'm going to go back to it. But today I am super, super thankful and grateful for the fact that I got to sleep in and I was able to relax and go get my lashes filled. And the girl that does them now, oh my gosh, she is the shit. Let me just tell you. So yeah, so that's all I need to say. That's just my little side note. But yeah, small talk, I like to give a little bit of small talk, but I don't want to waste your time. So let's just get on with the story, shall we? Before we start talking about the Hello Kitty murder, let's talk a little bit about the background of Hello Kitty. Who is Hello Kitty? So rumor has it that even though Hello Kitty looks like a cat, she is actually a little girl. She was created in Japan but designed to be British because Japanese people were obsessed with foreign countries at that time. The U.S. was also a popular interest among Japanese people, but since they wanted Hello Kitty to be unique, she was made British, and her actual full name is Kitty White. In the story, Kitty lives in London together with her twin sister Mimi and her parents George and Mary. Per official character profiles for Hello Kitty, she was born in the suburbs of London, England on November 1st. Her height is described as 5 apples and her weight as 3 apples. She is portrayed as a cute, bright, sweet, kind-hearted, and tomboyishly beautiful girl who's very close to her sister Mimi. She is good at baking cookies and loves her mama's homemade apple pie. She likes to collect cute things, and her favorite subjects in school are English, music, and art. Hello Kitty's blood type is A. Her trademark signature is a red bow on her left ear. Another interesting fact is that Hello Kitty actually owns her own pet called Charmy Kitty. Therefore, several people have argued that Hello Kitty is actually a girl who looks like a cat. Although their faces look identical, Charmy Kitty walks on all fours, unlike Hello Kitty, and Charmy Kitty doesn't wear any clothes. Sanrio's motto is social communication, and therefore they chose the word hello, even though they were actually thinking of calling her Hi Kitty for a while. Many people have been wondering why Hello Kitty doesn't have a mouth. Sanrio's explanation for this is because Hello Kitty speaks from her heart. Because they wanted Hello Kitty to be their ambassador for the world, she doesn't need a language, and they hope that she will encourage friendship all over the world. Another explanation of her lack of having a mouth is that people can project their own feelings onto her. So they can project whether they're feeling happy or sad, that, Hello Kitty, her lack of mouth and eyes give her a rather expressionless look, which is sadly one of the reasons that her popularity has literally been declining over the past few years. Interestingly, Hello Kitty does have a mouth in her animation series, which is called A Storybook Adventure. This was probably done in an attempt to express her emotions better. However, many Japanese anime, like the ones mentioned before, have characters that are a lot better at showing emotions. So, therefore, the Hello Kitty cartoon really wasn't much of a success. Now, this part is kind of funny. As of August 2007, Thai police officers who have committed minor transgressions, such as showing up late on the job or parking in the wrong place, they are forced to wear a pink Hello Kitty armband for several days as penance, which cracks me up. Anyway, that's a little bit of info about Hello Kitty and her history. Let's get on with the case. First and foremost, I do want to acknowledge the fact that my pronunciation of some words or names may not be spot on. I'm going to try. I tried to do some research on how to pronounce these names and these words, and it doesn't matter how much I practice. I could practice and have it right, but when I'm recording, sometimes I fuck up. So just so you know, it's not because, I'm not being respectful. It's just because I fuck up. I'm human. So just so you know, if you know the actual ways to say it, if you want to help me out later, I love getting, some comments and some help and all that kind of things. Because while it'll be too late to help me for this episode, I'm sure that I will be doing some more cases, from the same area. This one today is obviously taking place in Hong Kong, so if you can help me with any pronunciation, of course, sometime like later down the road, if I have another case that has the same type of pronunciations, it's really going to help me, and I would really, really, really love your help and assistance if I do anything wrong, okay? So anyways, Fan Man-Yee's life was tragic before she was ever even decapitated and had her head stuffed inside that Hello Kitty mermaid doll. Fawn was born in 1975, and when she was a child, she was abandoned by her family, which is obviously absolutely heartbreaking. This resulted in Fawn being raised in an all-girls orphanage. At age 15, she was told to leave the orphanage since they did have an age restriction. That's absolutely dreadful and sad because at age 15, you're still a child. But Fawn basically became homeless, and not surprisingly, it wasn't long before she was addicted to drugs. Fawn was forced to become a sex worker on the streets until the age of 21, when then she began working at a brothel instead. Fawn would eventually get married to one of her clients in 1996, but he was also a drug addict. She gave birth to their son 2 years later. Fawn's husband was described as being abusive, and neighbors would later report that they had been woken up by sounds of the couples fighting and from the child screaming and crying in their apartment. Upon the pregnancy and then birth of her son, Fawn decided to turn her life around in order to protect her son and provide him a safer life. She quit drugs and she quit sex work. By the age of 23, she had secured a job as a hostess at a nightclub, although she was still battling her addiction. Due to the life sacrifices she had made, she had a much lower income now, and she struggled to support herself and her family. being a hostess, it's not at all like it is here in the United States. If you're listening in the United States, when we go to a restaurant, a hostess is the one that, takes our name if there's a wait, and then eventually they bring us to our table. But in Hong Kong, the hostesses themselves don't seat you at your table, and they don't take your drink order. Rather, they concentrate on flirting and flattering the customers. The credit card-like time cards with which they use in their employment are a constant reminder that patrons are paying 350 Hong Kong dollars, which is equivalent to 45 US dollars, an hour, just for the privilege of their time and attention. The girls involved get sucked into the world of debt, drugs, as well as the triads. Now, triads are the violent secret societies that control Hong Kong's underworld. No man would dream of taking a hostess home with them for fear of triad reprisals. Instead, they would rent rooms by the hour in quote-unquote love hotels in the middle-class suburb of Kowloon Tong. Now, in early 1997, Fan met Chan Man Lok, a 34-year-old socialite. The two met at the nightclub and soon discovered that they had something in common. Fan was a drug addict, and Chan was a pimp and a drug dealer. Seems like a match pretty much made in heaven, but trust me, it fucking is not. This nightclub put Fan in an environment with powerful and dangerous men. Chan struck a fancy to Fan, and he became a regular at the club. He and Fan quickly hit it off, and before long, Fan became part of a crew that included Chan and his henchmen. She soon began to work for him as a sex worker to make some extra money. So here she goes again with the sex work. Later in 1997, desperate for money and drugs, Fan made the fateful decision to steal Chan's wallet, and she attempted to make off with the $4,000 that was inside of it. She did not realize that Chan was the last fucking person that you should ever steal money from. As soon as he saw his cash was gone, he demanded the money back plus interest. So Fan returned the money right away, but pleaded for extra time for the additional $10,000 in interest that Chan was going to charge her. She continued to sell her body to come up with that interest, but Chan said it wasn't enough and that he actually wanted $16,000. So she literally worked her ass off in sex work to come up with that $10,000. But then he says, oh no, bitch, that's not fucking enough because I'm a fucking asshole. And now instead of $10,000, I want $16,000. So you still owe me $6,000 in interest. It's fucked up. So Chan enlisted two of his henchmen, Luing Shin Chu and Luing Wai Lun, to kidnap Fan. They grabbed her and they brought her to Chan's residence, which was located at 31 Granville Road. This was an apartment building in a shopping district in Hong Kong. He intended Fan to be forced into sex work and take all of the money she earned as payback for the cash that she had stolen from him. The cash that she had already paid him. The cash that, she didn't owe him any more cash, but he didn't see it that way because he was a fucking demented bitch. As you can pretty well imagine, since there is a case and, such thing as a Hello Kitty murder, you already know that this plan got way out of hand, and it didn't take very long for that to happen. The drug lord and his henchmen soon decided that simply prostituting Fawn wasn't going to be good enough, and they began torturing her. Fawn spent her last days on Earth trapped in Chan's apartment. While they were high on drugs, the three men raped her repeatedly and tortured her. During the night, they would hang her up by her hands with electrical wire. Here are some of the gruesome things that Fawn had to endure during her time in captivity. The men burnt straws and poured the melting plastic on her feet, which of course caused blisters and sores. Then they poured a mixture of oil and chili powder into her wounds, her mouth, as well as her eyes. The men urinated in her mouth and beat Fawn if she did not swallow it. They made Ah Fong, the 13-year-old girl, defecate into a box and then forced Fawn to eat the feces. The men hung Fawn up and beat her with metal pipes. They threw oyster sauce in Fawn's face and eyes and also made her drink motor oil. Throughout her daily tortures, when Fawn would lose consciousness, they would start playing video games out of boredom. Her waking hours were filled with beatings, rape, and brutality. And even Ah Fong joined in on the beatings. The four of them beat Fawn all the time. They beat her when they were bored. They beat her just for laughs. Fawn was broken, and playing with her wasn't so much fun after that. But they carried on anyway, because there wasn't anything else to do. Ah Fong, which again is an alias because she was a minor, also witnessed Chan kicking Fawn in the head about 50 fucking times, and said, quote, "I had a feeling it was for fun." She then also joined in kicking Fawn in the head. On April 15th, when the men returned home one day, they found Fawn had died of her injuries. They claimed Fawn died of an overdose of drugs. Whether they gave her the drugs or she took them herself is unclear. Also, whether she took the drugs at all is so fucking questionable, because Fawn's husband told the courts later that she had given up drugs since their son had been born. Medical experts could not determine her cause of death because of lack of body parts, but believed that she did succumb to death because of her wounds. The death of Fawn, however, wasn't the end of her situation. The way the men decided to get rid of her body was possibly even more shocking than the torture she endured itself. Here is what they did after finding Fawn's body. They put her into a bathtub and dismembered her body with a saw. Then they boiled her body parts to avoid her body from rotting and emitting a stench. They placed her body parts in the trash bags along with other household garbage. They boiled Fawn's head and removed the skull from the skin, which they then sewed inside of the Hello Kitty pillow. And I guess they sewed it inside so that it wouldn't move around inside of the pillow or the toy. The men then placed Fawn's muscles, skin, and other organs after disemboweling her into Ziploc bags and stored those Ziploc bags in their refrigerator. In addition, they kept one of Fawn's teeth. Along with the callous way they treated her body both before and after death, it was also revealed by Fong that the men took about 10 hours to dismember Fawn's body and boil it. During the boiling of Fawn's head, the men were hungry, so the fuckers decided it was a great fucking time to boil some noodles in a pot on the stove right next to the fucking pot that was boiling Fawn's head. They were so fucked up and demented that they used the same chopsticks to stir both the pots and the head, or the noodles and the heads, so both pots, which is fucking disgusting. I'd like to think that these assholes were completely high on meth and didn't even realize what they were fucking doing, but literally, who knows? Although the details of the extent of the torture personally inflicted by Fong were not ever released to the public as part of her plea deal, they were no doubt extensive. I cannot even fucking imagine. It's really upsetting, but she was given protection in exchange for her testimony against Chan and the other two men. Fong hoped that admitting the torture and actions the group took against Fawn would help stop Fawn's ghost to continue, to stop it from haunting her. Fawn was literally haunting her, she said. So I don't know if it was just her guilty conscience that was not enabling her to rest, or if, I totally believe in ghosts 5,000%, so it could have been Fawn haunting her, and I hope that is actually the case. But nevertheless, at least we know that Fong was feeling guilty for what she did, and she was being tormented by either the memories or the thoughts or the actual ghost, and she went to police. So there's that. And she was just a 13-year-old girl. So anyways, with the confession by Fong and the evidence from the apartment, both Chan and Xing Cho were arrested on May 25th and May 26th. Wai Lun was in China, and he was later brought back to Hong Kong a few months later. All three denied killing Fawn, but they did admit to preventing Fawn from receiving a burial. Because the body was so badly dismembered and so much of her body and so many of the parts were missing, medical examiners could not determine the cause of death, and therefore the three could not be charged with her murder. Crazy, right? It makes sense, but it is crazy. Each of them also claimed that the other was responsible for various acts, which included the beatings, the dismembering, and the disposing of her body. The trial that lasted 6 weeks, of course, caused a media frenzy, and everyone was talking about the Hello Kitty murder, both in media and amongst themselves. Sandy Chan, a sales clerk in Hong Kong, admitted, quote, "It's horrible, but it's so interesting." And Irene Chang, who is a hairstylist, added, quote, "That kind of thing, you think, okay, it happens every day in New York, or maybe on the mainland, but not in Hong Kong. So people can't help it. They just want to know." The jury accepted the defense's argument that they did not kill Fawn with intent, which would have meant a mandatory life sentence, but determined she died as a result of their abuse. All three men were found guilty of manslaughter, unlawful imprisonment, and preventing the legal burial of a body. They received a 20-year sentence with the chance of parole in 2020. During the trial, all three seemed to have very little remorse and didn't apologize to Fawn's family. Fawn's husband said he accepted the sentence given out, but said, quote, "But how can I ever forget?" The justice overlooking this case said, quote, Never throughout the years in Hong Kong has a court heard such cruelty, depravity, callousness, brutality, violence, and viciousness perpetrated by a human being or human beings on another human being. Even an animal would not have been maltreated in the same way as received by the deceased. The building where Fawn was tortured and killed was abandoned by all of the residents, with many claiming that Fawn haunted the hallways. The entire building was bought and demolished in 2012, with shops now standing where the old building stood. The building has been demolished. The interior of the apartment where Fawn died has been totally destroyed, and many of Fawn's remains have been lost. It's just so heartbreaking. But the details of this savage and senseless story live on in Hong Kong and around the world. Once hearing about the murder that took place in a Hello Kitty decorated apartment with a skull sewn inside of a Hello Kitty pillow, you will never be able to look at the kid's character the same way. And I cannot. I used to think Hello Kitty was like a cute character. And now that I know about this case and the way Fawn died after just being brutally tortured, like, I'm not even interested in having or owning or seeing or looking at anything Hello Kitty related. And it's, not Sanrio's fault, obviously, but it's just something that I could never, ever bring myself to look at in the same way. So despite the culprits being caught and sent to prison, the fact that they may already be out on parole is very hard to believe. Whether justice was served or not, this crime will definitely remain a sad and brutal mark in the history of Hong Kong. Now, I do want to let you guys know that one of the defendants who was convicted in the Hello Kitty murder case in 1999 was just this motherfucking month sentenced again for another crime. He was sentenced to 12 months in jail. For what, you ask? This fucker assaulted a 10-year-old girl. The 48-year-old defendant, Xing Cho, one of the henchmen, Xing Cho, was charged in the West Kowloon Magistrates Court. According to the court, he was accused of touching the body parts of this 10-year-old girl, who was his friend's fucking daughter, claiming that he was just providing her a massage last December. So December of 2021. This motherfucker put his hands on this little girl. Thankfully, the magistrate judged the behavior of Xing Cho, and they judged that it was well beyond being a quote-unquote massage and that he was taking advantage of the trust of this young victim. The level of the sentence should consider the extent of the case arousing public resentment, together with the concern of protecting children's rights under the law from being assaulted, said the magistrate. This piece of shit, Xing Cho, was originally sentenced to life imprisonment. Then he was sentenced to 18 years in prison after appealing and completing his sentence in 2011. But then he went and did that 10 years later. As far as everything else I could find, the other two fuckfaces are still in prison, and I, for real, hope that it stays that way. So I know this case was a bit shorter than what you guys have been used to from me lately. Still brutal, still sad. One thing that just strikes me as being the most heartbreaking is that Fawn didn't really stand a chance from the very beginning. I mean, she grew up in an orphanage and then was kicked out of the orphanage at age 15. So it breaks my heart to think that she never really got to experience any kind of normalcy or like a regular family life. And it just crushes my soul when I like think about, you know, the fact that she went through that. And there's perhaps other people that are, you know, go through that now. And like, you know, those of us who are true crime enthusiasts and we're listening to this right now, we can't really relate to that because as far as we know, like we never feel like we have it all together, but we are very, very lucky, and we should be very grateful and very happy with, you know, what we do have in our lives right now, because at the end of the day, we're not enduring anything like Fawn had to endure. We didn't have a childhood or a life like Fawn. I didn't have a great childhood, but it was nothing like what Fawn had to endure. So I could never even like make it relatable. Doesn't make mine any less important, but at the same time, it like can really open up a person's eyes and kind of be like, hey, you know, I don't have to feel sorry for myself because of what I went through, because, you know, I'm hearing about all these other people who just had it way worse. And not to diminish anything that we've all gone through, but it just really can open up your eyes and really make a person get out of their self-pitying type of stuff. You know what I mean? But anyways, I also wanted to mention that I am now posting my videos up on YouTube. So all 30 of the first episodes are on YouTube. And, you know, I wanted to mention, this is super important to me, that even though we're talking about terrible things that happened, you know, to people and tragedies that families are still going through. I mean, they're still suffering the losses of their loved ones, you know, 10, 20, 30, 40 years later. There are surviving family members, and that was just, I mean, I always knew this, but it just like smacked me in the face yesterday because a family member from somebody that I did a case on previously, I'll tell you who in a minute, commented on one of the YouTube clips that I uploaded from the podcast because it was the one about her mother. And like, you never know if family members are going to come across any of these podcasts, any of these YouTube videos, any of these anythings. Like, I don't know if somebody in my family was brutally murdered. I don't know if I would seek out podcasts or stories about that case. I don't know if I would want to listen, but maybe I would because I'm super curious. I am kind of nosy. But we always have to remember, like, for us content creators, if we are putting ourselves out there, there are so many podcasts, I'm not going to name any names, but there are so many podcasts out there that I find very offensive. Like, I try to make mine lighthearted. I am a bubbly person. I am a happy person. I don't want to come on here and be like, oh my gosh, guys, I'm going to like depress you with this monotone voice and this terrible story. You know, I am a more bubbly person. So, you know, trying to like put that hand in hand with talking about murders and, you know, people being brutalized, you know, doesn't always seem like it goes hand in hand. But I always try to my best to make sure that I talk as much about the victims as I can, that I'm honoring them, that I find out as much about them as humanly possible. And unfortunately, in most of these cases, there is so much more to be found about the perpetrators, the serial killers, the murderers, than there is about the victims. And that really sucks. Like, every single time I am researching a case, it's honestly difficult to find a lot of information about the person that was murdered or brutalized or, had the crime committed against them. And I'm not happy about that at all. But anyways, for those of you who have been with me since the beginning, or at least have heard my episode from Mother's Day, I released the Winifred Ransom case with the murder of Margaret Sweeney. She was the first known victim of fetal abduction. Well, I put that on YouTube, and one of Margaret Sweeney's daughters commented. She made 2 comments on that post, which it just really struck me that, yes, family members are out there, and if they see their loved one's case out there in the public, they might choose to click on it and listen. So, it's just a reminder, like, if you are a content creator, if you are a podcaster and you're listening to this, like, I'm just asking you, like, for solidarity, and I'm asking you to join me in trying to make sure that, when we release these episodes, that we try to be as respectful as possible to the surviving family and, to the victims. And I know most of them are, but every once in a while I come across some that, if they're just laughing the whole time and making jokes the whole time, some jokes and some banter, it kind of, like, it's okay because, we get nervous talking about things like these possibly. But I think that's why I chose just to do this podcast by myself and not ask a friend of mine, to be a co-host with me, because I just think then it would run the risk of possibly coming across as harsh or unappreciative or disrespectful. And, like, I just want to let you guys know that I'm always really, I'm really focused on being respectful. So I just wanted to let you guys know that in the future. So that just, yeah. So the daughter's name is Kim, and I'm sure she's an amazing person. She sounded kind of hurt in the comments that she made, and I just responded to her in the most respectful way that I could, because I can't imagine. Like, I'm lucky enough that my mom is still alive. She just turned 70, and this other Kim, Margaret Sweeney's daughter, didn't have that. She doesn't have her mom anymore, and it's not by her choice. So, like, I really feel for her. I felt for her when I was doing the case. I felt for her and all of her sisters, and I feel for her now too, especially because she reached out to me on that YouTube clip, and just really you could have knocked me over with a feather, let me tell you, So anyways, everybody go out, be kind today to somebody, or everyone. Just be kind to everyone. And if they're not kind back, just whatever, move on. I only want to associate myself with kind people, honestly. Like, my circle is getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And that's the way I like it. I hope you guys have an amazing week. Sundays are my favorite days, besides, putting out the new podcast episode. I like to call it Sunday Fun Day, because I start my day off with a workout. I listen to another podcast. I can't stand listening to my own. Every once in a while, if I have to listen to it just to make sure that I edit things correctly if they need editing, I always hear myself, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, why do I have any listeners at all? It's so super cringy. But anyways, I do have some favorite podcasts, and I hope that this podcast is one of your favorites. And if it is, go ahead and rate it 5 stars on Spotify or Apple. If you have a quick minute to do so, go ahead and leave me a quick Apple review if you listen there, because it truly lets this podcast be seen and be recommended to other true crime enthusiasts. So when they run out of episodes of whatever they're binging and they're looking for something else, boom, Always Talking Crime kind of like will be recommended to them, and it'll be because of y'all. So thank you so much. Thank you for everything. Thank you for 31 fun, fantastic episodes of true crime. Until next time, guys, keep talking crime.